Diving straight in, here's an explanation of how the French Revolution came to be. It all started in the summer of 1789, in the great nation of France. The great majority of the people all lived in impoverished, poor conditions. You know, they'd be in filth, chillin' out, maxin', relaxin', all cool, and the aristocracy and king did nothing to help. The aristocracy's negligence of the people brewed their anger and their desire for justice. There was an unbalance in power and representation, and these opinions came out into the National Assembly. The National Assembly had the three estates together, the first two being the higher, richer people, and the third estate representing the ordinary common people. The third estate wanted the king to change the economy in France, so it would be easier for the commoners to buy food. Because we all know, when the French can't get their bread, their society begins to crumble. Their argument was for their natural rights and for their basic needs as a human being. Because of the political injustice in the National Assembly, the third estate didn't get what they wanted, as the other two estates were able to rule them out. So the third estate was like, "No way, Jose," and created their own assembly and said they wouldn't separate until France had a constitution. This is now known as the Tennis Court Oath, as it is believed that they moved to a tennis court and proclaimed it. They wanted more equality between the high class and the low class, and would not stand for the large difference between the classes. As King Louis XVI started to accept some of their requests, he also rounded up troops in Paris, but they were never used. The common people were finally fed up with the king's abuse of power, so they revolted with the famous storming of the Bastille. This occurred on July 14th, and this was the beginning of the France Revolution. The revolution lasted 10 years, and between those years, many aristocrats were killed and revolution became very radical. The revolutionaries just really wanted to bring pain and fear to the aristocracy, so they started bringing them to the regretful climb, the national razor, the fanlight, the widow, the silence mill, none other than Madame la Guillotine. The extreme behavior of these people were interpreted and can be seen from the literature during this time. Many people had different opinions to the revolutionaries. Some people feared that the people of France had become too extreme and the revolutionaries took it too far, sort of like Lucy from A Tale of Two Cities. This opinion is expressed in William Blake's poem written in 1791, The French Revolution. The dead brood over Europe. The cloud in vision descends over cheerful France. O cloud well appointed. Sick, the prince on his couch, wreathed in dim and appalling mist, his strong hand outstretched. From his shoulder down the bone runs aching cold into the sept, too heavy for mortal grasp. No more to be swayed by visible hand, not in cruelty bruised the mild flourishing mountain. Some thought the sacrifice of the aristocrats was necessary because it really do be like that sometimes, and this was the only way they could ultimately bring justice to France and promote equality instead of the previous inequality between rich and poor. Just like Madame Defarge in A Tale of Two Cities. An Englishman named Joseph Johnson stated in his Analytical Review that
the most singular and most interesting collection of state papers ever published, for what are the machinations of despots, or the intrigues of worthless statesmen, when compared to the object now before us, a nation of 24 millions of people, raising their unanimous voice in favor of liberty, and the rights of human nature, it is with peculiar satisfaction that we contemplate so great a cloud of witnesses to the cause of freedom. As men and as Britons, we most sincerely wish them success, and pray that no differences amongst themselves may obscure the glorious prospect before them. We are confident indeed, that it cannot long be obscure. Clouds may appear, and occasion a temporary gloom, but the sun of freedom has arisen, and the mists of despotism will vanish before the brightness of his rays.
These two opinions were prevalent in the revolution, as people either saw the revolutionaries as a necessary force or radical savages that took it too far. This also coincides with the feeling in France of chaos and uncertainty of where France would go.
Now, the French Revolution was great and all, but what about those isles to its north? Those wacky Brits were cooking up a bunch of crazy things, like steam and capitalism. the culmination of which was defined as the Industrial Revolution. And this did a lot of things, mainly improving production, infrastructure, and efficiency. But that's not the whole story. Essentially, the English Revolution would cause a series of unfortunate consequences, ranging from the philosophical conflict about economics to the continuation of slavery. In Britain, the social climate was getting warmer, and not just because of the pollution. The Industrial Revolution brought about a massive social reform, with business owners and entrepreneurs being in control of entire corporations, each employing mass amounts of the population that were moving into the cities in search of jobs. The different classes at the time were the aristocracy, who retained some power from their inheritance and ownership of land, the upper middle class, who were heads of business, the lower middle class, who took care of basic services, like doctors or policemen, and the laboring class, which made up the majority of the population and were the ones doing work in the factories. But because all the power was concentrated in the hands of the upper middle class, it meant they could abuse the working class all they wanted to achieve their own agenda, making them work ridiculous hours and in terrible conditions. But hey, at least their kids were with them for some quality bonding time. These conditions would then lead social reformists like Karl Marx to criticize the system, and mainly how he saw one fundamental flaw with capitalism. To explain, imagine a businessman during this time who produced typewriters. First, he would need materials to make them, and let's say it would cost £3 to get the materials he needs. Now the businessman also has to get workers to assemble the typewriter. The average pay for a worker was about 10 shillings a week. Then to make a profit, he sells each typewriter at £6. After paying the workers 10 shillings and £3 for the material, it would leave him about £2 and 10 shillings worth of profit. The problem Marx saw with that was that the workers created far more value than they were being paid, creating £3 worth of value while only being paid a sixth of that. The businessman, paying only for the materials and not increasing the value, was the one who made most of the profit. And it was here that Karl Marx would say, "You've activated my trap card," because he would then say that the problem of capitalism was right there. The worker was creating more value than they were receiving, while the owners were receiving more value than they created. So this then puts into perspective that the socialist-capitalist conflict was not only about money, but also about two different schools of thought. The practicality of capitalism, where the strong would rise to the top for their efforts, while the weaker served under them, and the encompassing nature of socialism, where rapid progress would be traded for everybody's collective success. Both sides can make good arguments about why their system is better, and why the other is the root of all evil. But if there's one thing we can agree on, it's that this video has gone on for too long. But wait, there's more. Earlier I mentioned slavery, and you might be wondering, didn't the Europeans stop doing that after the Enlightenment? And you'd be sort of right. Back then a lot of European merchants relied on the slave trade, but after people started getting conscious about it, business began to plummet. This left them with two choices. Either go into the textile industry or smuggle slaves into America. In America, since Congress couldn't outright ban slavery yet, they put on heavy restrictions on slave use that discouraged many from using them. But the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney made harvesting cotton much easier, and as a result, demand for cheap labor went up in the South. European merchants then seized the opportunity to buy slaves from West Africa in order to satiate the demand. If the Europeans hadn't interfered, slavery would have likely fallen out of use in America, with low-wage workers on plantations instead of slaves. But instead, the freedom of 4 million people would be delayed another 70 years. So, yeah.